has a story, every heart has a song. Every road that we travel has a place where we belong. Welcome to Grove and Lantern Story Saturday.
Last Saturday, we finished our journey with The Adventures of Sophie the Cat with No Tail, a story about discovering that being different does not make us less. Sometimes the things that set us apart become the very gifts that make us special. Today we begin a brand new adventure, a story that travels across oceans, through generations, and into the roots of a family whose choices shaped the future. This is the story of the frontier legacy rooted in distant soil, a story about love, courage, dreams, sacrifice, and the choices that become the foundation of the generations who come after us. Every family has a story. Some stories begin with a grand moment. Others begin quietly with a choice, a conversation, or even a single person standing at the edge of a garden wondering what the future might hold. And that is where our story begins, in England, many years ago. In the beautiful countryside of Staffordshire, England, there stood an estate called Challenor Hall. The estate had gardens that stretched across the land, filled with carefully tended flowers, trees, and paths that had been shaped over many years. It was a place where tradition mattered, where families carried their names proudly, where people knew their place in society. And among those gardens worked a young man named Charles Lasby. Charles was not born into wealth or privilege. He was a gardener, but he possessed something far more valuable than position or fortune. He had a gentle spirit, a strong work ethic, and a kindness that people noticed. Every day, Charles cared for the gardens. He understood that beautiful things did not happen overnight. A garden required patience. It required attention. It required someone willing to nurture something before anyone else could see what it would become. And in many ways, that is also true of life. Not far away, another life was unfolding. Margaret Challenor was the daughter of the family who owned the estate. She had grown up surrounded by comfort and opportunity. But Margaret was not simply interested in appearances or expectations. She had a curious mind, a compassionate heart, and a desire to understand the world beyond the boundaries of the estate. Although Charles and Margaret came from very different circumstances, their paths crossed, and slowly they began to see something in one another that went beyond social standing. Sometimes the most important moments in history do not look important when they happen. A conversation, a friendship, a decision, a moment when someone chooses courage over comfort. Charles and Margaret lived in a time when society placed strong boundaries between people. There were expectations about who you should marry, what family you should belong to, what future you should pursue. But sometimes the heart sees something that society does not. Sometimes a person's character matters more than their circumstances. And sometimes the beginning of a legacy starts when someone chooses to follow what they know is right. The story of Charles and Margaret is not only a love story, it is also a story about choice. Every generation faces choices. Do we follow the path others expect? Or do we create a path that is true to who we are? The decision to choose a different path is rarely easy. It often requires leaving behind something familiar. It requires courage. And sometimes it requires believing in something that others cannot see. Charles and Margaret could not know all of what their choices would eventually create. They could not see the children who would come after them. They could not see the families that would grow from their decisions. They could not see the generations who would look back and wonder, how did our story begin? But that is an amazing thing about a legacy. People who create it often never know how far their choices will reach. What can we learn from the beginning of this story? Perhaps it is this: every person has the ability to influence the future. The choices we make today become part of the story someone else inherits tomorrow. A kind word, a courageous decision, a willingness to build something better. These things become roots. And roots matter, because before there can be branches reaching toward the sky, there first must be roots firmly planted in the soil. But the story of the frontier legacy is just beginning. The garden at Challenor Hall was only the first chapter. Soon difficult decisions would be made. Families would leave familiar shores. New lands would be discovered. Dreams would be tested. And courage would be required. Because a legacy is not built when everything is easy. A legacy is built by people who continue forward when the path is uncertain. Join us next Saturday for The Frontier Legacy, Rooted in Distant Soil, Episode 2, A Love Beyond Boundaries. Until then, remember, every family has roots, every life has a story, and every choice can become part of a legacy.